Hello, good evening and welcome to your go-to destination every Sunday evening for the topical conversations and discussions around the polity from within and outside Nigeria. This is Sunday Politics, compliments of the season, and welcome to the program. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Now, Nigerian states have for long been described as underperforming tag-alongs that are unable to function without federal allocations, which have become the primary source of revenue for funding most of the state's operations. Now, a recent report by the Debt Management Office has exposed the depth of the debt trap in Nigeria's subnationals. Despite improved federal allocation, most states today are unable to meet their obligations like payments of salaries and other entitlements. So, what is wrong with the system? Or are the funds just inadequate? Or is it just a classic case of mismanagement? On the program tonight, we speak to Dr. Umar Bindir. He is a former immediate past national coordinator of the National Social Investment Program, a well-versed civil servant at both federal and state level. As you may know, on the program, we give you an opportunity to also be a part of the conversation by chiming in and giving us your take on this particular conversation. Doctor, good evening, and thank you most kindly for joining us in the program. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Right, let me just get your overview on this talking point. Debt has been a sore point, so to say, in the public discourse. More often than not, whenever it's been discussed, it is discussed from a point of a burden, a disease, so to say, that continues to fester within the governance circle. What is your take on where we are right now as a nation as far as our debt is concerned?
Well, just like you introduced, the Debt Management Office is the key institution of government, monitoring the inflow of borrowed resources or the exchange of resources from the debtor to the creditor. If the debt management by the brief has informed Nigerians that debt is becoming a real problem, then it is a problem. However, I don't think any creditor will credit or give you anything if you are not worth it, unless if that particular creditor is a waste of time creditor. So for any state to attract loans or credits or grants, it is standing possibly on a higher, drier ground, as far as, so to say. So it is not very palatable to be piling up debts. But I think possibly the states have got something under their sleeve in terms of improving their revenue generation, improving the productivity of their people and their institutions. Hopefully in the future that they can be able to meet repayments and possibly generating more resources to be sustainable.
From your experience in government, give me an idea of the scale of the problem. We know that resources will always be finite. There will always be limited resources to go around to address it, whether it's human resources, whether it's material resources, and so on and so forth. Give me an understanding of the scale of what needs to be done versus the available funds, and what, in your view, is informing this continuous trajectory of borrowing to finance projects, to finance recurrent expenditures we've seen in some cases, like payments of salaries and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah, commitments for development in any part of the country is dictated by three things. The first is the governor and his team in government will look at the level of misery and suffering and vulnerability of their people, literally meaning what is the level of poverty in my state. And this is dictated by, number one, people can't have access to healthcare facilities. Therefore, you have information or data to do with maternal mortality rate. Child mortality is very high. That is not palatable. Any government would want to solve that. Secondly, same poverty levels can be defined by the number of children that are out of school. So basic education, access to basic education is a challenge. No government would want to see that to continue. Three, food security. People must have something to eat. and if possible, balanced sources of food. Again, if most of your people cannot do that, no government can sit down and say, oh, and so on and so forth. Now, these are the poverty levels. Therefore, you need resources to do that. But that is not the only problem. For you to be able to sustain the solutions on poverty, you need to build the capacity. For production of food, the farmers have to perform better. They must have skills. You must have better inputs. They must flow quickly. So the middle class operations, must also be developed so that people have skills. They can be able to work to earn, and they can be able to have access to these things. And then lastly, at the third level, you develop institutions to make sure that this capacity building and reduction of poverty is sustainable. Therefore, institution has to mature. So it is this are the conditions that pushes governments to say, look, we need to spread a development rate at this year and next year and so on and so forth. And it is that slice of that year's budget that will look after those supplies. So they will budget. How much do we go for education and health and so on and so forth? And then they look at the 3 or so sources of their resources to now liquidate this budget for implementation. They look at the federal allocations, which is is just a forecasted thing. They look at their own revenue generations, again, it's a forecast. And then they look at what we call as receipts, capital receipts, grants and other bits of loans flowing in. So they put these 3 together, and then their own fiscal responsibility people, their financial people, does the analysis to say that, yes, this is the amount we're going to get from federal. This is what we're going to get from, and we can be able to attract these receipts, including loans, so that we can be able to implement. This is how it works. And when the federal allocations is weak and the state revenue is weak, they look at that and be able to ramp it up so that they can be able to implement their yearly budgets.
In talking about fiscal responsibility or discipline, as the case may be, there's quite a lot that is left to be desired, because according to the Debt Management Office, some 6 months after taking over office, 13 new governors have collectively borrowed the sum of 226.8 billion naira from domestic and external financiers. And also, the report also shows that 16 governors have also increased their debt profile of their states by 500 billion naira, with domestic and external debt of 243.95 billion and 298.5 million dollars. All of this signposting the ever growing appetite of subnationals in Nigeria with acquiring some of these debts, some of these loans to quote-unquote finance the budget because of the huge deficit that we have year on year, but also the controversies around whether or not there's enough justification to really show proof as to why these borrowings are continuing unabated, and whether or not we've seen some sort of result for all the monies that have been borrowed over the years that continue to pile up interest, as the case may be. We're going to take a moment's break. When we come back, we're going to double down on this particular conversation, plus segue into one of the emerging controversies around this particular debt profile in one of the states here in Nigeria. More on this after the break. Welcome back to the program. You're watching Sunday Politics on Trust TV. The conversation is taking a look at the debt profile of the subnationals across Nigeria. The debt burden continues to rise as more and more governors continue to explain why they're unable to do all that they have promised to do for their various states because of the limited resources available to them. Let's head over to Kaduna State now, because this weekend the story that is emerging from Kaduna State is causing quite the stir as at a town hall meeting, Governor Obasani of Kaduna State made the stark revelation that he's inherited quite a significant debt that may inundate his administration and may likely stifle their ability to get the job done, even when it comes to payment of salaries. Well, let's hear from one of the stakeholders who is shedding light on the debt profile of Kaduna State, which is emblematic of most states in Nigeria.
the scheme to bail us out. I was just reading the position before coming in, and our border debt is 587. It is more than the other six northwest states combined. So abinda ake bin mu a nan ya fi jihohi shida na northwest yawa a foreign debt. Dan talikin nan dole a tausaya mushi, dole a samu fahimta, kuma we should be ready to sacrifice. The most important thing is peace must be allowed to prevail. Ya yi maganan hanyoyi a hanya, ya yi maganan you cannot do farm, you cannot do anything in bad peace, bad security. So congratulate you, Your Excellency, for the release of the pupils, 157 or 37, and by the grace of God, we hope this will be the last time we'll hear such a thing. We thank you very much.
One of the contributors there, just adding to the points made by Governor Ubasani, and that particular point has unsettled the political establishment, if you will, in Kaduna State and beyond, because it feels like someone is pointing the accusing finger at the predecessor, the former governor of Kaduna State. But of course, many Nigerian states are heavily indebted, from Lagos to Yobe, and from the look of things, all of them are above the threshold that may look healthy as far as borrowing is concerned. It is a term, or perhaps a practice, that is common not just here in Nigeria but everywhere else across the world. Governments do borrow to finance certain policies or programs as well as their budgets. However, what we're seeing in Nigeria is rather critical, in the sense that most Nigerians are saying they're unable to see results for all the borrowings. Once again, back here in the studio is Dr. Umar Bindir, the former national coordinator of the NSIP, that's the National Social Investment Program, now the Social Investment Program Agency. Just before the break, we're about to segue into this particular area where the Debt Management Office is talking about how 13 new governors have collectively borrowed 226 billion naira in just 6 months after taking over office. This is obviously a sign to say that, listen, there's nothing in the coffers. And every now and then we hear this. Governors take over and they say, I have only liabilities, very few assets, and I can't even, make things, I can't even operate the government. As someone who has, operated at that level, give me a sense of how true this reality is, because we're seeing a continuation of this particular practice.
Well, you see, based on my experience as the secretary to the state government in Adamawa State, what I know is that any state that follows the due process in estimating the resources available to it and reflecting on the sources of other resources, and then respecting the comments and observations of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission of that state, it will not get into this problem. Now, I remember when we, in 2018 or so, we had an anti-corruption summit, and the then president was there. And we demonstrated that if you follow this due process, you budget well, you listen to your fiscal responsibility, you then implement the budget to the letter, there's very little narrow space for unnecessary corruption, But then we studied budgets over a 10-year period, right, to see projects implemented and projects budgeted for. You cannot believe this, but we observed that over that 10-year period in Adamawa State, the extra budgetary expenditure that is totally not budgeted for, actually dominates the expenditure of government, meaning the budget document, which is law, is sitting on one side and the expenditure is on the other side. And there are reasons for this, So, so these states that are getting into trouble, in my opinion, is if the Fiscal Responsibility Commissions, and I'm aware that the World Bank assisted most, if not all, the states to establish very viable fiscal responsibility commissions, with the training them, showcasing how do they estimate all the sources of resources, to showcase to the state government that this is how credit worthy you are. And this is the amount of money you're going to get through federal and so on and so forth. Now, if you follow the reports, the annual reports of the commission, you'll not get into trouble. But I guess that most states that are getting into trouble does not. The second factor is, this is very traditional for new governments. There are two spots when you actually see a lot of borrowing. When you come in, you inherit a lot of liabilities, right? And then you inherit a lot of unfinished projects, right? And you know, some of the projects you have to pay the contractors, some of the projects you have to complete the project, some the projects have been completed, they've not been funded, and therefore you have a huge debt burden yourself. So you have to quickly shock treat that, otherwise your government will start off very, very weakly. The second phase where you face this challenge is when you exit. A lot of governments, when they exit, they want to now generate a lot of momentum in expenditure so that, you know, especially second tenure.
To live on a high note.
Yes, to live on a high note, and in the course of doing that, you incur a lot of challenges. So all these states will differ, whether it is an incoming challenge or an exit challenge, but certainly it is a problem in our country that require very, very serious technical solution. And most governments must, I think, reflect on, if you don't have enough, you cannot incur expenditure on more things that you can fund.
Let's talk about what the people think of this, because we talk about borrowing, we talk about the debt profile, and more often than not, these states, as indebted as they are, the problems continue to multiply. Pensions are not being paid, salaries are not being paid, the roads are not getting constructed, and so on and so forth, but the debt keeps piling up. What do you have to say regarding why people are not seeing value for the monies that, you know, their state is indebted to, for instance?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think every state should endeavor to ensure that they have very crispy information and data on all its operations. You know, you must showcase, when I'm coming in, these are the things that I met on the ground. And the public should have access to these things. You know, these are the roads that have been awarded. This is the amount of money that has been paid. The roads have started, and it has not been concluded. To conclude them in the present regime of costs and exchange rate, this is what is required, right? If you have such data, you continue comparing what you need to solve your problems plus what you've inherited, and you showcase it like you saw in the town hall meeting in Kaduna State, then people will appreciate the current government. If this continues, it means every year you will demonstrate what you have done. And every year, at the end of the fiscal year, you will demonstrate the challenges you are facing, the shortages you are facing, or the surpluses. And I think if we do that, things can be able to calm down a bit. The second thing is, when it comes to the personnel emoluments, I think, again, I have seen many states, every time a new government comes in, you want to check how many civil servants, do we have ghost workers, and so on and so forth. You know, if it is on the retirement side, how much pensions and gratuities and so on that I've inherited. Again, it's crispy data that is going to help you with that. If you don't have data and you're constantly changing the goalpost as you run, you will continue to have problems.
Why are programs like these strengthening fiscal transparency and accountability, as well as sustainability initiative of the World Bank, that is even incentivizing state governments to be more transparent with their books, to be more accountable with the resources that has been allocated to them, why is it not making headway? Because it is even paying these state governments some sort of grant, it's giving them money as incentive to be more open with their books. Why is that not perhaps changing the game as we know?
Well, I think that is exactly what I was talking to you about, the establishment of the fiscal responsibility commissions of states. The World Bank, this is exactly what the project is. Encourage the states to improve their procurement processes, to improve their budgeting processes. When you do this, you need capacity building. You need the right people with the right qualifications, with the right commitments. And in states, there is a short supply of this kind of content. So you need constant hammering of building capacity, checking and rewarding people who are good, punishing those who are not very good, and literally sanitizing the system. Unfortunately, with the political environment that we're operating, it's very difficult to implement these highly sharp technical strategies without touching the politics. And when you touch the politics, it touches everything. So for you to have a win-win, in my opinion, is that you have to be just transparently open. Tell people exactly what we have, and this is where we're heading to.
And do you think governors have, I'm not putting all of them in the same basket, but to be fair, most states are in the same basket as far as the profile is concerned. Every state is highly indebted, and more often than not, you don't seem to see where all the monies have gone to. And it doesn't make sense. That much of the explanation is that we've paid salaries, so that explains a lot. But also we've seen an improvement in federal allocation since the removal of fuel subsidies. The states are earning a lot more now. But it is not stopping the borrowings from continuing. How do you juxtapose these two? I mean, they have increased revenue. We're witnessing also the amendments to some of these exclusive legislative provisions in the Constitution, where states now can explore their mineral resources. They can delve into the power sector, for instance, and generate. All these avenues are now being created. Why is borrowing still a popular tradition with state governors today?
I think the priorities keep changing. In most states, if you combine the effects of COVID-19 and then the effects of the fuel subsidy and possibly the weakness of the naira, you put all this together, you find that governors and governments are struggling, and when they continue to struggle, then you start, like you've seen, there's an increased emphasis on palliatives and helping people just to pop up. And this is in line with the generic strategy to solve problems. There are things that you can solve immediately. So when people are in a shock, they cannot feed, they cannot go to their farms, insecurity is affecting people, the first thing you can do is you say, cushion the issues. And that is where palliatives come. While you are doing the palliatives, because it's not sustainable forever, then you have to now build the generic, further subsidies, make sure that fertilizer is available, make sure that, mechanization inputs are cheaper for farmers, make sure that you're building capacity of a lot of, the productive system, so that it will now cater for the palliatives as you go. It will generate employment, produce food, and so on and so forth. But this takes time. And, and also at the latter level, you are now building institutions to make sure that at the highest level of management, you are establishing agencies with better laws, empowering them to operate better, and so on and so forth. So these are early days to now start hammering on the governors to say, debts are piling up and you are getting into trouble. This is only their first year.
For some of them.
Well, it's a new government. Yeah. It is started, whether you are continuing or not. But, you rank it based on the new government, literally. So nobody is talking about what have we inherited, right? So that you know the level of the challenge. We're just assessing the challenge on the spot, So I think we should give the governors and the government some time, possibly assess them in the second year, and then see whether we are learning or we are not.
One of the easiest things to predict in Nigeria as far as governance is concerned is that the debt will always, continue to rise. We've never seen it come down. I mean, except for when we got the debt relief in early 2000s. But, from there to now, the numbers are quite staggering. But let's also take a look at another set of data that will shed light on the income of some of these states. Now, these are some of the FAC allocations from last year. In North Central, for instance, before the removal of fuel subsidy, a state like Benue, for instance, got about 71 billion. Now, after the removal of fuel subsidy, it is getting almost 19 billion in addition to the point of 90 billion. And you can see that for other states also, there is a significant improvement in federal allocation. What about other regions in the country? Let's take a look at yet another region to understand the scale of the improvement in terms of federal allocation. To the south now, Delta State, before now, it was 266 billion. That is their annual revenue from the federal government. Now it is about After the before the removal, it was 266. After the removal, is 217. So a dip there for the South. In Rivers State, 215, 211, the current figures. But for most people, this is more than enough to change the lives of the citizens in those states. Let's take a look at another region now to understand the scale of the situation. In the northeast, for instance, going to Dr. Bindir's home region, in Adamawa State, interestingly, from 61 billion, now it's up to 77.5 billion. And you have the likes of Borno State that is close to 100 billion with 98.19 billion naira in federal allocation after the removal of fuel subsidy. Let's take a look at the northwest as well as the southeast, just to gauge the figures there. In the southeast, also quite remarkably, you're seeing it. Well, it is a common trajectory except for the south, and of course, their number cannot compare with any other number because of the derivation that they usually get. So theirs is already on a high note. So I suppose the removal of fuel subsidy is not something that would have such a negative impact. But this, to so many people, Doctor, is reason why the state should not be borrowing, because they're getting more now from federal allocation, because fuel subsidy is gone and they have more in their pockets now. They can afford to pay salaries, they can afford to pay improved minimum wage, and so on and so forth. Why aren't they doing it?
Well, I actually, yes, these numbers may look convincingly a healthier allocation, but I would have loved this data to be in dollars.
Right.
You know, the one before, at the time when it was, let's say, 71 billion.
Why does the dollar matter in this conversation?
Because most of the capital operations of states in this country are dollarized. You know, your road construction, a lot of the skills and the technology coming into it is dollarized. It's a foreign sources of technology. You see people establishing railways and roads and so on. You see foreigners behind the queue when you commission them. This is dollarized. When you buy vehicles, it's dollarized. Are
we paying the contractors in dollars? Are we not paying them in naira?
No. Yes, the contracts, the quoting of the contracts are actually translated from dollars to actual. I don't think the rate of expenditure or the exchange rate at the time of the before is actually the same with the exchange rate of the after, and that is a factor. And I would have also loved to see the percentage increase as a third column, so that you can be able to gauge the challenges that governors are inheriting against the maybe infinitesimal change in percentage. You know, so this data that you see is too raw to actually start saying, oh, they are getting a lot of money or small. So for me, I think the most important thing is to understand the challenges that the states are facing. I know for one, the effects of COVID is still there. When COVID hit, we shut our markets, we shut our schools, we shut everywhere, and there's a serious dip in productivity everywhere. And that, before you can remove the effect of that, it will take time. Two, effect of insecurity in many of the states have stopped farmers from going to farm, and people cannot travel up and down with their goods because of the fear and so on and so forth. That also has affected productivity, and the effect is going to take some time before you remove it, and then you have now the effect of the fuel subsidy removal. You know, so when you put all these and you compare it to the numbers that you see on the screen, maybe a further scientific analysis is required to demonstrate what is happening. But certainly, piling up debts is an issue, you know, because all debts has to be repaid. And unless a state has got a very clear track or trajectory in its own revenue generation, improving its own productivity, helping people to be creative and innovative to function, you know, reducing unemployment, improving wealth creation and so on and so forth, then you can always see the curve of the debt pile-up going up.
Just before we open the phone lines, let me get your reaction to this one. It's a cliche that usually dominates a conversation around debt management, and debt burden that we're mortgaging the future because of how it is piling, and debt servicing alone at the national level is quite significant, so much so that you wonder whether we're going to be able to get some of these huge capital projects done, because we still have to service those debts that are still gathering interest because of the time factor. Give me a sense of whether you have a feeling that these governors understand and care enough about the future to say, listen, I'm trying to do all these legacy projects, but I have to think about the future of the state after I'm gone. Do you think that that is something that is orbiting within their consciousness when they go for these loans?
Consciousness of governors, I don't think anybody can be able to estimate other than the governor himself. But he contested, he deceived or convinced the populace to say that I am the right person. And naturally, you have all parties presenting governors, and he managed to present himself, and he won. So people trusted that this is the man that can sort out our economic challenges. This is the man or woman that can sort out our social problems. This is the management style that is good for us. But for me, I think the indices for the future should be entrepreneurship, job creation, wealth distribution, and gradual modernization of even the rural areas. When that is happening, you will see schools that are better. You will see that children are passing well. You will see that businesses are popping up. You will see that inflow of resources is coming into the state because people are coming to buy your things. People are coming to work with you. People are coming to joint venture with you. These indices, when you don't see it in the states, then these loans are actually a danger.
Okay, let's get to our phone lines now. Our phone lines are open. If you want to join the conversation, give us your take, your version of this conversation with regards to the burden of those loans on your state, and whether or not you've seen the dividends of, or perhaps the return of investing those huge sums of monies that have been perhaps invested in your state, because there is this sense that most states did not utilize those funds in the most judicious way possible. Feel free to give us a call. We would love to hear from you this evening about what you make of the burden of those debts in your state specifically. The number is showing you on your TV screen. Rules of engagement: please turn down the volume of your TV set while calling in, and be as articulate and concise as possible. We'd love to know your name and where you're calling from, and then go ahead with your take on the discussion. And we talk about, we're talking mainly about the subnationals, but do you think at some point the federal government is going to step in and say, listen, guys, I think we're biting more than we can chew here, because a burden to a significant part of the states is a burden on Nigeria as a whole, whether they are independently collected or not. Do you get a sense that they're treating this as a critical situation that needs to be sorted out?
I think the debt management of it is a highly professionalized institution. And
okay, pardon the interruption, Doctor. I think we can get over to the phone line to speak to our first caller on the program. Hello, good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Abdullahi, Ahmad, and Bindi in the studio.
Thank you so much for joining us. Is this Shamaki?
Yeah, you are speaking to Shamaki from the Nasarawa State.
Thank you so much for calling in. Go ahead.
Yeah, you see, definitely some of the states in this country must have this burden, because at times the issue of godfatherism is bringing all these problems. When I saw the among all use of money that this display on your screen from Kaduna State, I was shocked. Obasani thinking that he's going to run the government like that. But if he continues, certainly he can no longer pay his workers, and the problem will go to him. So for him to voice out is not a crime or bad. But I'm highly disappointed his son, the former governor, which is Erifai, coming out blasting the present governor. So we even have similar case in Nasarawa State. So issue of bringing somebody to come and continue for instance is one bringing all these problems. So he must have to voice out, because if he continues quietly, certainly he cannot. He may end up having problems with his worker and the people in the state entirely.
Right.
So this is what I can be able to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shamaki. As always, appreciate you for joining the conversation. Pardon the interruption there, Doctor, but go ahead. You were trying to make a point earlier. And if you could just jump in on what Shamaki had to say, where the politics of the conversation makes it difficult for us to really have an understanding of whether there is, science going into the decisions of those chief executives when they are going for these loans, because usually we see them anoint the next person to come in who then has to stick with the arrangement of some of these debt payments.
Well, that is politics. It's not particularly a very technical thing. Politics, in our country, the model is very clear. So to comment on politics, I don't think is within the brackets of my expertise, to be quite honest. But it does happen. Godfatherism in our country is very prominent everywhere. And you see things happening here and there, sometimes very difficult to explain. But what we have to realize is that, as I was saying, the debt management office at the federal level is highly professionalized. And we will know the extent of this problem when, at a point, you now start seeing signals from the debt management office saying, this state, you cannot take any loan anymore. Because the whole thing is centralized.
Constitutionally, can they?
Of course.
Can the debt management office stop a state?
The Ministry of Finance, particularly I know of external loans, the Ministry of Finance is actually the one that actually organizes this.
Okay. Yeah. Just a moment, Doctor. Let's go back to the phone lines. Hello, good evening and welcome to the program. Your name, please, and where you're calling from. Hello there. Okay, I suggest we move on to the next caller. Try again, give us another call. Sometimes the network can be quite tricky. I would love to get your take on this one, and feel free to turn down the volume of your TV set when you call in. We want to have a direct conversation with you, so the interference is not going to help us do just that. The number is shown on your TV screen. Feel free to call in and give us your take, your opinion, your thoughts, your recommendation. Tell us about your state and the debt profile of your state, and whether or not you think is justified all the monies that have been collected over the years for your state. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. Okay, try again. I'm aware that it is the same caller that is trying. Feel free to try again. The network, as I did say, can be quite tricky. If you want to have your say, feel free to try again. The number is showing on your TV screen, and we're talking about the state's financial burden. Just hours after the Kaduna State Governor re-echoed how he has inherited liabilities of contracts as well as debt servicing that has inundated his administration and is forcing his hands to the point that he may not be able to do much. Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Huh?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Welcome to the program. What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm calling.
Okay, I think we can move to the next caller. It doesn't appear to be ready to have a conversation. But in talking about, the grand scheme of things, we're talking about the legislation that is put in place. External loans, as you were trying to point out earlier, need certain ratifications and approvals before it has been accessed. And we're seeing more and more states able to get those, especially the Kaduna State, for instance, that we're talking about right now, that is polarizing the residents or indigents of Kaduna State, who are saying, listen, we've seen all the projects, so we think there's enough justification to show what those monies were expended on. And those who are saying, well, we've tied the hands of the current administration to a point where, there's very little wiggle room for them to operate and have, a similar impact or consolidate on what has been done. When it comes to debt management, for instance, what are some of those mistakes that you think some states make when it comes to managing their debt profile?
I think the generic thing is a very simple matter. You take any loan, even if you now, Abdullah, you go to UBA to take loan, you have to fill papers. And one of the requirements is that you have to have a guarantor. They will say, in case you run away with our money, who do we hold that has the financial muscle that we can get our money from? So any state that is taking loan, whatever loan, there's a guarantor hidden somewhere. And in most cases, it is these allocations that you see at the federal level that serves as what they call as ISPO, and they sign, the state government will sign. We're taking this loan to do these projects, and we have subscribed that draw this amount of money.
In case of a default?
Not even default.
Right.
Draw this amount of money from so date to so date, because they say land, the loan tenure or whatever. So they sign it. So, but there must be a point whereby the guarantor will say, no, you are not worth any loan, and therefore I'm not going to sign the form. Go and look for another. And this will come soon if the credit worthiness of a state is beginning to be challenged. And I think if we get there...
Do you think, I mean, looking at our states right now, I mean, even Lagos, which is one of those states that is most economically viable and is the most indebted state in the country, I mean, it gets to a point where you're talking about debt to GDP ratio and things like that, and whether or not, you know, there's enough room for you to continue to accumulate those debts. I mean, how many states, in your view, are capable of, you know, that tag of credit worthiness?
I think the credit worthiness literally is some kind of guarantee at the federal level. The resources that we share monthly or yearly literally is the guarantee. And when you see Nigeria as a viable country, as a country that is vibrant, a country that has a future economically, socially, and you know, whatever, then that, you know, people who are granting loans are running towards Nigeria.
Right, okay.
Hello.
Someone has just joined the conversation. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program.
Yes, this is Comrade Bella calling from Benue State.
Comrade Bella from Benue State, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, comrade.
Kai, I am so much surprised to see the number of the allocation allocated to our state. And up to today, the state is still owing civil servants. The state civil servant is up to 10 months. And local government is more than 1 year. And we don't know when these arrears will be paid to us. In fact, it's so surprising. And one may think the amount they can pay clear this debt. Even when Tinubu said all state governors should pay their arrears, our state is still owing us.
Right.
So I don't know whether maybe the president should.
Hello, comrade. Are you still there? Okay, we've lost our connection to Comrade Bella from Benue State, who is speaking to the data on that screen from 71 billion naira annual federal allocation to about 90 billion and counting, and those numbers continue to grow in light of the current crude oil market fluctuations and some of the inflows which are quite considerable over the past few months. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. Okay, the network is a bit tricky there, but you know, just to pick it. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Welcome to the program. Go ahead. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good evening. Who is on the line and where are you calling from?
Mr. Engineer Boniface.
Engineer Boniface, where are you calling from?
I'm calling you from Benue State.
Go ahead, please.
Hello? Makodi precisely.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Okay. I think Mr. Boniface is not ready to share his thoughts with us. Try again. We just had a caller from Benue State who was talking about the endemic non-payment of salaries despite the huge amounts of money coming into the state. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. Hello.
Hello, good evening. This is
Good
Adamu calling you from Plateau.
Adamu from Plateau.
Yeah, this is Adamu from Plateau.
Go ahead, Adamu from Plateau. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sir. And
Go ahead.
thank you so much.
Well, that is rather unfortunate. Much of the connection this evening has been unstable, but try your luck. We have a couple of minutes to spare with regards to getting your views and perspective to this one. The number is showing on your TV screen. We'd love to get your insight on this particular discussion, especially from the perspective of what you make of what's happening in your state. So pending the next call coming in, Doctor, if you can sum up this particular issue. I mean, you've been at the receiving end of people saying, pay us our arrears, pay us our salaries, pay us this and that. The numbers suggest that the states have more now. What's going on in your view? What is the likely explanation as to why more means these governments can do less?
I think the simple answer to all these challenges is the budgeting process and the budget implementation process. Anytime you budget, it should be clear, and when you implement the budget. And budgets have two components. You have the recurrent and the capital. The capital is what you use to do your projects, you procure and you proceed, and the recurrent is where you pay all these things. Now, I can't understand how all of a sudden that a state will owe its personnel 12 months and so on and so forth. So what have you budgeted for? I have a feeling that the challenge, possibly, there is some extra budgetary expenditure that it's not budgeted for, and you are spending money in that area, and there's no oversight. Because in the states, it's not like federal. The federal government, the oversight is very, very strict. But in the states, literally there is no oversight. You know, the legislation is very, very weak. You know, so the law can be broken. I mean, the budget is low. And when you do extra budgetary expenditure, you are breaking the law. And who holds, you have the governor is the approving authority. The commissioner is and the PAMSEC, they are the budgeting. Then the whole process seems to not to be working. And therefore, there's certainly a need, possibly from the federal level or non-governmental organizations, to start looking at the process. You budgeted 10 billion to now construct this road, 10 kilometers, and you procured a contractor to proceed with that, and then the road is not constructed. You can see it very, very clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
The interesting part of this particular conversation is that you get a sense that it's timeless, because this is a practice that continues to go on, and it continues to raise eyebrows across the country about why these states continue to borrow more, meaning that in the future they cannot afford to do those same borrowings, regardless of how urgent or important some of those projects are, because of the huge debt servicing, as well as some of those loan agreements that have been signed and agreed to. We're going to have to end the conversation here for now. Doctor, as always, thank you most kindly for joining us in the program. Really do appreciate you for stopping by.
Thank you, but I think one comment is that I think this is the major reason why Mr. President has launched his renewed hope agenda. It is recognizing these stream of challenges that doesn't seem to stop, and I hope that the subnationals will, penetrate into this and look at the wisdom and implement it accordingly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bindir, for your expert analysis as always, and thank you most kindly for joining us. We do appreciate you for making the time and for joining us on the program. For those of you who tried to call in unsuccessfully, thank you for trying. We'll do this again next week, Sunday, live and exclusive, as always, on Trust TV. Until then, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed, from myself and the rest of the team. Thank you for watching the program. We'll see you next time.